Millionaire thought she was in a coma until his pregnant wife logged into his bank account. Have you ever heard a secret so shocking it sent tremors through an entire family? This story is no ordinary tale of wealth and jealousy. It's a swirl of hidden identities, breathtaking deceit, and a pregnant wife's startling discovery in her millionaire husband's bank account. When James Harrington, a wealthy entrepreneur in London's high society, believed his mistress lay in a coma, he thought his perfect life would remain neatly under wraps. But a single login by his pregnant wife, Elizabeth, unleashed a storm of buried truths. Brace yourselves. This unfolding drama will drag you through betrayal, obsession, and desperate ambitions gone terribly awry. James Harrington was the sort of man people either idolized or envied. Tall, confident, and impeccably dressed, James came from old money but built even greater wealth on his own. He was known to sign deals that turned entire industries on their heads. In some circles, he was referred to as the Golden Touch because anything he invested in thrived. Paparazzi flashed their cameras at him when he emerged from charity galas. Business journalists devoted countless articles to his strategies. He had not just one penthouse in London's upscale Mayfair district, but also a sprawling estate in the English countryside. Yet behind this glamorous front lurk secrets few knew. The public witnessed the perfect facade, a self-made millionaire married to a poised wife, Elizabeth Harrington, who was glowing with pregnancy. To outsiders, the couple seemed an ideal match, two successful, refined individuals whose union promised a bright future. Elizabeth came from a respectable lineage as well. Her father, Sir Edmund Blackwood, was a renowned heart surgeon who had saved lives in the highest circles of power. She embodied elegance and dignity, an expectant mother with her feet planted firmly in the realm of polite society. On a chilly autumn afternoon, the Harringtons hosted a charity luncheon at their estate. The property, called Rosemore Manor, was an old-world country house enveloped by acres of manicured gardens. Guests arrived in luxury cars, stepping out in sophisticated suits and dresses. Everyone marveled at the curated rose garden, the symmetrical hedges, and the tranquil fountain in the courtyard. Among the guests was Michael Bingham, James's longtime friend, who had also served as best man at their wedding. There was Lady Catherine Stewart, a well-known patron of the arts, sporting an elegant brooch rumoured to be worth a small fortune. Finally, there was Alexandra Lexi Delacroix, a rising fashion designer who had James as her silent financial backer. Elizabeth entertained guests, her smile radiant, exuding warmth that made everyone feel welcome. It was a picture of marital and social bliss. Yet, through the polite conversation, the popping champagne corks, and the hushed talk of philanthropic pursuits, a nervous flicker in James's eyes surfaced each time his phone buzzed in his pocket. He would discreetly check the message, then stuff the phone back in his jacket with a stiff expression. Something beyond the scope of perfect hospitality gnawed at him. As the event continued, Elizabeth's eyes narrowed slightly each time James grew tense at a text. She was no fool. She sensed an unease in her husband. But it was easy enough to mistake it for stress about business deals or something to do with the brand new software venture James was launching. Little did she know, those messages had nothing to do with software or philanthropic commitments. Instead, they were updates concerning a young woman named Cassandra Delgado, a woman whose existence was carefully shielded from Elizabeth. A woman James believed to be in a coma at a private hospital across town. Cassandra Delgado was a name known only to a select few in James's circle, his personal assistant, Victoria Mills, and a private doctor, Dr. Alan Friedman, employed to watch over Cassandra's health. James had met Cassandra 6 months earlier at a finance conference in Paris, ironically the same weekend Elizabeth discovered she was pregnant. Cassandra was not just another fling. She was a brilliant equity analyst who had enthralled him with her wit and sharp insight about European markets. Their conversations had sparked a potent attraction James couldn't resist. Their affair played out in secret rendezvous, discreet hotel suites in foreign cities, late-night dinners at restaurants known for their absolute confidentiality, and impassioned weekends in James's private chalet in the Alps. For a while, it was simply a thrilling romance. Cassandra wasn't content to be just a mistress. She was ambitious. She challenged James's decisions in business, questioned his philanthropic methods, and occasionally even criticized how he balanced personal responsibilities. There was a level of engagement and unpredictability that mesmerized him, but then the fateful accident occurred. Cassandra was returning from an investment conference in Geneva when her car skidded on a patch of black ice and slammed into a guardrail. The crash left her with severe head trauma. She was rushed to a private clinic in London, where James footed the astronomical medical bills. The doctors placed her in an induced coma to help her recover from swelling in her brain. Initially, James feared that if his wife discovered Cassandra or her expensive care, everything he had worked for his marriage, his carefully curated public image, would come crashing down. And so James orchestrated a cover-up that was as elaborate as it was callous. He paid Dr. Friedman and the clinic's administration handsomely to keep Cassandra's presence off any public records. Using shell companies, he transferred funds to the clinic each month, ensuring top-notch care. To the outside world, Cassandra Delgado had practically vanished. Cassandra's friends assumed she had gone off the grid, perhaps traveling or shifting jobs. James had confiscated her phone and personal belongings, feeding bits of misinformation wherever necessary. In his mind, James told himself that paying for her care was the right thing to do. He rationalized that he was protecting both Cassandra and Elizabeth, safeguarding them from scandal. Guilt for the accident gnawed at him, though logically he knew he had not caused her to drive on that cursed patch of ice. Still, had it not been for his encouragement, she might never have rushed to catch that late-night flight from Geneva. More than guilt, though, James was driven by fear of exposure. When he received daily updates that Cassandra lay comatose, stable yet unresponsive, he felt a twisted sense of relief. He convinced himself that, for the moment, the problem was contained, allowing him to keep living his life as the perfect husband and soon-to-be father. He never dared visit Cassandra in person for fear someone, maybe a nurse or a random onlooker, would recognize him. No, he planned to wait until after Elizabeth gave birth, after the dust settled, to figure out how to handle Cassandra's eventual recovery. He'd pay for her rehabilitation, give her a handsome settlement if necessary. Then she would disappear from his life. That was James's plan until it all unraveled. 2 weeks after the charity luncheon, Elizabeth was about 6 months pregnant. Her morning sickness had subsided, leaving her more energetic. She filled her days with prenatal yoga classes and working with interior designers to perfect the nursery at Rosemore Manor. Pale yellow walls, hand-painted murals of whimsical animals, plush carpets shipped from Turkey, nothing but the best for the awaited heir or heiress to the Harrington fortune. As for James, he was flying under the radar, busily ensuring the final touches on his new tech project, a software suite that promised to revolutionize data analytics in the finance world. He spent days locked in high-level meetings and nights locked in his office, answering calls from Dr. Friedman about Cassandra's condition. Then, one evening at Rosemore Manor, the landline rang. Elizabeth, sipping herbal tea, answered. The person on the other line was Dr. Friedman, using the private number he wasn't meant to dial without explicit instruction. Panicking, Friedman said, "Hello, this is an urgent message for Mr. Harrington. May I speak to him?" "It's about the patient, Cassandra Delgado." Elizabeth froze, confusion swirling in her mind. Why was a doctor calling the house line about someone named Cassandra Delgado? She gathered herself quickly. I'm sorry, Dr. Friedman, did you say? My husband is busy. Can you tell me what this is about? Flustered, Friedman stammered something about a misdial, then hung up abruptly. Elizabeth set the receiver down slowly, her heart pounding. Cassandra Delgado. The name meant nothing to her. Yet the mention of patient roused a storm of questions. She marched into James's study, where he was poring over financial reports. You had a call, she said, voice tight with concern. Dr. Friedman. He mentioned something about a patient named Cassandra Delgado. James's face went ashen. In that split second, Elizabeth saw the flicker of guilt, fear, and something she recognized as panic. He tried to cover it with a laugh. Cassandra Delgado? I've never heard of her. Probably a telemarketer or scam call. Let me see if I can find out. He gently maneuvered Elizabeth out of his study and closed the door. She stood outside, heart pounding. Something was off. Telemarketers didn't usually identify themselves as doctors discussing a patient. And James's behavior was telling. She wasn't sure what she suspected, but she felt an uneasy stirring in the pit of her stomach. Perhaps the stress of pregnancy heightened her intuition. She resolved to watch James more carefully. The next day, James departed early for a business trip to Berlin, at least. That's what he told Elizabeth. In reality, he was meeting with Dr. Friedman at a hidden clinic in London. Tucked away on a quiet street in Kensington, this clinic catered to high-profile clients who wanted absolute privacy. James slipped through a side entrance, wearing a cap and dark sunglasses. In a dimly lit office, Dr. Friedman looked uneasy. I'm sorry, Mr. Harrington. I had an emergency last night. Cassandra had a sudden fever. I was trying to reach you on your private cell. When it went to voicemail, I thought I'd try the home number. I didn't realize your wife would pick up. James glowered. We can't have any more mistakes, Friedman. If my wife finds out about Cassandra, everything I've built could implode. But more importantly, how is Cassandra's condition? Friedman exhaled nervously. She's improving. She's been stirring more, responding to stimuli. There's a possibility she could come out of the coma sooner than we anticipated. That news, which should have been cause for celebration, filled James with dread. That's good, he forced himself to say. Keep me updated. Make sure no one visits her. I'll handle the finances, but I can't be seen here often. Dr. Friedman nodded. Of course, Mr. Harrington. I'll keep everything confidential. Returning to his car, James was overcome by a swirl of worry. If Cassandra regained consciousness, what story would she tell? Would she accuse him of abandoning her? Of a cover-up? She could demand money. Or maybe she'd keep quiet if he paid her enough. He tried to quell his anxiety by reminding himself that he was still in control. After all, he had connections, he had wealth. He would find a way out of this. Back at Rosemore Manor, Elizabeth's day took a fateful turn. She decided to finalize the nursery budget, a seemingly mundane task. Typically, her husband's personal assistant handled financial transactions, but Elizabeth wanted to oversee the details personally. She tried to log into their joint online bank account, but found the password had been changed. Confused, she tried James's usual set of passcodes, birthdays, anniversary dates, random numbers, but nothing worked. Elizabeth frowned. It was peculiar. They had always had open access to each other's accounts. They were a family. Why would James abruptly change their shared password? Her mind flashed back to the phone call from Dr. Friedman. Could the two be connected? She called James only to get his voicemail. This was uncharacteristic, given how quickly he usually responded to her calls. She left a message. James, it's Elizabeth. I tried to get into our bank account, but it's not letting me. Did you change the password? Please call me. Several hours passed. No return call. Her nerves frayed. Elizabeth rang Michael Bingham, James's old friend and business confidant. Michael seemed taken aback by her worry. James told me he was dealing with some sensitive business transactions, Michael said. Maybe that's why he changed the password. Try not to stress, it can't be anything major. But Elizabeth couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper was afoot. The next day, she decided to tackle the problem more directly. She drove to Harrington Capital's headquarters, a sleek skyscraper in central London. Inside the labyrinth of glass, walled offices, employees bustled about with hushed urgency. Elizabeth was well known, so the receptionist allowed her to go straight up to James's office on the executive floor. James wasn't there, nor was his assistant. The door was locked. Through the frosted glass, Elizabeth spotted a laptop on the desk. Anxiety gnawed at her. She felt uneasy snooping around, but a stronger need to know the truth compelled her. She reached for the spare key hidden behind a potted plant. She knew of its existence from casual mentions over the years. She entered the office, closed the door behind her, and approached the desk. The laptop was locked, demanding a password. Determined, she tried a variation of significant dates, typed systematically, word by word. Finally, something clicked. The password was the day they found out she was pregnant. The screen unlocked. Elizabeth's heart hammered. She noticed a folder labeled Private Delgado. Confusion roiled. Was Delgado the same name she had heard on the phone? Without hesitating, she clicked it open. A flurry of documents appeared: medical bills, statements from a private clinic, transactions to a doctor, Friedman, and other references to Cassandra Delgado. Terrified and fascinated, Elizabeth skimmed through. Her eyes widened at repeated monthly payments, extraordinarily large sums for a private ward, intensive neurological care, advanced treatment. She covered her mouth as her mind pieced together a horrifying puzzle. Cassandra Delgado was in a private clinic. James was footing the bill. The first payments started about 6 months ago, the same period that coincided with Elizabeth's pregnancy announcement. The medical documents contained phrases like accident, trauma, severe head injury, induced coma. Elizabeth sank into James's desk chair, trembling. Why would her husband pay for a stranger's long-term hospital care? Why was everything so secretive? She stared at the bank transactions, noticing that they originated from a separate account in James's name, one she had never heard of before, an account that had shockingly high balances. The next evening, James returned home from his business trip, expecting a serene mansion and a warm welcome from his pregnant wife. Instead, he found Elizabeth in the lounge, perched on the edge of a sofa, her hands clasped over her belly as though shielding the baby from some intangible threat. A thick file of printouts rested beside her. "We need to talk," she said, her eyes blazing with anger and betrayal. "Who is Cassandra Delgado? Why are you sending thousands of pounds a month to pay for her care in a private clinic?" James's composure wavered. He had practiced 100 possible cover stories during his drive back, but Elizabeth's furious gaze shredded his mental scripts. He tried to deflect, to spin a narrative about charity or philanthropic responsibility. But Elizabeth cut him off with a tremor in her voice. "Don't lie to me." Realizing he could no longer feign innocence, James offered a curated version of the truth. He told her that Cassandra was a talented consultant he had been working with, that she got into a serious accident. He felt responsible because she was returning from a work trip on his behalf. So, out of guilt and duty, he covered her medical bills. Elizabeth listened, tears brimming. "And you had to hide it from me? Create a secret account? Password protect everything? Pay off a doctor to keep it all quiet? That doesn't sound like a normal sense of responsibility. That sounds like an affair, James." He hesitated. The truth was that while Elizabeth was perceptive, she didn't know every detail yet. A wave of self-preservation overcame him. He tried to placate her with half-truths. "We got close while working together, but it was a lapse in judgment. I'm sorry. I never meant for you to find out. I was going to handle it myself. Elizabeth's tears spilled. You betrayed me while I've been pregnant with our child. I've stood by you, loved you, given you my trust. She clutched her abdomen as though feeling the baby's presence more acutely. I can't believe you'd do this. You've left me humiliated, James. In that moment, James realized how fragile his fortress was. For all his wealth and cunning, he had failed to keep his double life hidden. The love and respect that once bound them seemed to fracture before his eyes. He reached out to Elizabeth, but she shrank away, tears cutting sharp lines down her cheeks. This marriage, she said, voice trembling, is standing on very thin ice. If I discover anything else you're hiding, any more lies, I will walk away from you for good, and you will not see this child. With that, she retired to her bedroom, leaving James alone, the flickering fireplace reflecting the turmoil in his mind. He felt the pang of losing control, fear of losing the woman he still cared for, perhaps more than he realized. Yet, in the swirling chaos, he also felt the haunting presence of Cassandra, the mistress who might awaken any day. If Elizabeth discovered the depth of his involvement with her, the entire house of cards would topple. 2 days later, Elizabeth confided in her father, Sir Edmund Blackwood. Over tea in her father's study, tears running down her cheeks, she explained the situation in broad strokes, omitting certain details that made her feel ashamed. Sir Edmund listened gravely, his brow furrowed. I had a sense James was not the type to lead a straightforward life, Sir Edmund said, kindly but firmly. He's brilliant, driven, but also secretive. There's a reason his success soared so quickly. Elizabeth wiped her eyes. I still love him, Dad, but I need the whole truth. If I can't trust him, how can I raise a child with him? Sir Edmund placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. Then find the truth. You're strong. You have resources. Use them. Spurred by her father's encouragement, Elizabeth decided to dig deeper. She wanted to confirm James's story that Cassandra Delgado had been a consultant for his firm and was now comatose. If that was all there was to it, an affair plus guilt, could she handle it? Possibly. But if James was hiding more, she had to know. So she hired a private investigator named Daniel Pendleton, famed for discretion and thoroughness. Pendleton pulled phone records, scoured flight manifests, and discreetly interviewed staff at Harrington Capital. The puzzle that formed was more damning than Elizabeth feared. James and Cassandra had been spotted in Paris, Rome, and the Swiss Alps, all at times that overlapped suspiciously with James's business trips. They had shared hotel suites, and Cassandra was seen wearing expensive jewelry that James must have gifted her. Even more disturbing was how meticulously James had orchestrated Cassandra's disappearance from public records after her accident. Pendleton uncovered a hidden web of shell companies channeling money into the private clinic, proving that James was funneling large sums to keep Cassandra's condition out of official hospital databases. Elizabeth's heartbreak deepened. It wasn't merely an affair, it was a labyrinth of lies, spanning at least 6 months. She felt betrayed, but a quiet, steely resolve took hold of her heart. She wasn't just a wife or a victim, she was the daughter of a knighted surgeon, a soon-to-be mother, a woman who deserved respect. She planned her next move carefully. If James insisted on subterfuge, then she would meet with Cassandra Delgado herself. And if Cassandra remained in a coma, perhaps Elizabeth would glean enough from medical staff to piece together the missing fragments. Under the guise of a routine obstetrics appointment in London, Elizabeth slipped away to Kensington and found the private clinic that Dr. Friedman ran. Using a fabricated story about being referred for a consultation, she convinced a young nurse that she needed to see Dr. Friedman. The nurse led Elizabeth down a hallway lined with glossy paintings of pastoral scenes. A subtle hush lingered in the corridors. When Dr. Friedman saw Elizabeth, he seemed to blanch. "Miss S. Harrington, this is unexpected. How can I help you?" Elizabeth, trembling with a mixture of fear and determination, said, "I know my husband is paying you to treat Cassandra Delgado. I want to see her. I have the right to know what's going on." Friedman tried to maintain composure, but sweat gathered on his brow. "Miss S. Harrington, this is highly irregular. I'm bound by patient confidentiality." Elizabeth's gaze sharpened. "Is the confidentiality greater than the hush money you're receiving from my husband? Because I promise you, if you don't let me see her, I will expose every financial transaction. I will drag this clinic and your name through every court in London." Flustered, Friedman hesitated. Finally, with trembling reluctance, he led Elizabeth to a small, private room. The beep of monitoring devices and the hush of ventilators filled the air. On the bed lay a young woman with bandages wrapped around her head and the fourth line in her arm. Her eyes were closed, her expression strangely serene amidst the medical machinery. Elizabeth approached the bed, heart pounding. Cassandra Delgado was beautiful, even in her vulnerable state. High cheekbones, long lashes, and an aura of intelligence in the lines of her face. Elizabeth's anger wavered into a wave of pity. Is this the woman James had risked everything for? "Yes, that's Cassandra Delgado," Friedman murmured. "She was in a severe accident. We had her in an induced coma for months. Recently, we began reducing sedation. There are signs of improvement, but it's slow." Elizabeth's throat tightened. A swirl of conflicting emotions arose: hurt, jealousy, compassion. She gently touched Cassandra's hand. It was warm. For a fleeting moment she wondered, did Cassandra love James? Did James truly love her? Or was this all just a reckless fling? She turned back to Friedman. "Will she recover?" He nodded hesitantly. "We're hopeful. There's still swelling in her brain, but she started to show reflex responses. She could wake up in days or weeks. Hard to predict. Sometimes patients need months of rehabilitation." Elizabeth swallowed hard. The knowledge that Cassandra might soon awaken brought a new kind of dread. If this woman regained consciousness, she might reveal every sordid detail of the affair. Elizabeth braced herself for an uncertain future, but she also felt a strange sense of power. She had seen Cassandra. This was no phantom mistress. She was a flesh and blood woman who might hold the key to unraveling James's carefully curated world of secrets. That evening, Elizabeth returned to Rosemore Manor and found James pacing in the study, his tie loosened, hair disheveled. He had apparently learned from Friedman about her visit to the clinic. The moment she stepped inside, James stormed toward her. "What were you thinking going there? Barging in on Friedman? You don't understand the damage you could cause." His anger ignited hers. "Oh, I understand plenty. I understand you had an extended affair, that you orchestrated a cover-up, that you funneled money through sham accounts to keep her out of sight. I understand you lied to me while I'm carrying your child." James's face contorted with guilt and frustration. "I never meant to hurt you. I was going to end it. Cassandra's accident changed everything. I felt responsible. Responsible or cornered?" Elizabeth shot back. "You could have told me the truth. Instead, you lied and lied, expecting me to remain in the dark while you played savior to your mistress." James's anger deflated. He sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. "Elizabeth, I'm sorry. I can't undo it. I panicked. I was afraid to lose you, to lose my family, my reputation." She stood before him, arms folded protectively across her chest. "Well, here we are now. I'm not sure what to do. I've considered leaving you, but we have a child on the way. Do I want our baby to grow up without a father?" Tears welled in James's eyes. "I love you. I genuinely do. The affair was a catastrophic mistake. I tried to fix it. If you need me to sign anything, to put your name on all the accounts, to do whatever it takes to prove my loyalty, I will. Just don't leave me." Elizabeth watched him, pained. For all his wealth and brilliance, he suddenly looked small and pathetic. Part of her wanted to comfort him. The other part bristled at the notion of rewarding his deception. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "But from now on, no more secrets. That includes Cassandra Delgado, especially if she wakes up." Days passed. Elizabeth tried to maintain normalcy, focusing on her pregnancy and the daily rhythms of life at Rosemore Manor. Yet tension simmered beneath the surface. She avoided James as much as civility allowed, speaking to him only about baby necessities or household matters. At night, she stayed in a separate bedroom, unable to share the same bed with a man she felt she no longer recognized. Then, one morning, Dr. Friedman called. This time he reached Elizabeth on her cell phone by design, at her request. "Miss S. Harrington," he said, his voice urgent, "Cassandra Delgado has emerged from her coma. She's awake." Elizabeth's heart lurched. She thanked Friedman and hung up, shock waves rippling through her. She found James in his study. He looked up, wary. "What's wrong?" She bit her lip. "Cassandra's awake." His face paled. "When did this happen?" "Apparently, sometime late last night. She's conscious, though probably confused and fragile." James stood, restless. "I need to handle this." "She might." Elizabeth lifted her chin. "She might what? Expose you? Tell people the truth?" He shook his head. "I can't just abandon her. She was part of my life. But if I go there and someone sees me, the press..." Elizabeth drew a calming breath. "You orchestrated this for months. You can't hide behind fear now. If you want to talk to her, then do it." "But I'm going with you." James looked startled. "What? Why?" Elizabeth's voice wavered but held firm. "Because if you think I'm going to let you have a private little meeting with the woman you cheated on me with, you're dead wrong. If this marriage stands a chance, I need transparency, complete transparency." James reluctantly agreed. Within the hour, they arrived at the private clinic. Dr. Friedman led them to Cassandra's room, cautioning them that she was weak and disoriented. There, on the bed, Cassandra lay with her eyes partially open, an expression of confusion etched on her face. When they entered, Cassandra's gaze fluttered between them. Her voice, rasped by disuse, barely rose above a whisper. "James? Where am I?" James approached her, hesitantly taking her hand. "You're in a private clinic in Kensington. You had an accident, a car crash." Her eyes searched the unfamiliar surroundings. "I remember driving. Then impact." She looked at Elizabeth, perplexed. "Who is she?" James swallowed. "This is my wife, Elizabeth." A flicker of realization or heartbreak flared in Cassandra's eyes. "Your wife," she repeated softly, her voice thick with emotion. She tried to raise her body, but tubes and a sense of weakness held her down. "What's happening? Why am I here?" "James, what have you done?" Elizabeth stepped forward. "He's been paying for your care. You've been in a coma for months. I only found out a short while ago." Cassandra's eyes brimmed with tears. "A coma? So everything is real." Her gaze turned to James with an agonized confusion. "You promised me a future. I told you I didn't want to be someone's secret. And now your wife is here. You lied to me." James winced, unable to hide his shame. "Cassandra, I'm sorry." But Cassandra cut him off, her anger giving her a surprising burst of strength. "Don't say sorry. You put me here in this locked-up facility. No one could find me or visit me. Did you think I wouldn't wake up? Or that I'd vanish?" Elizabeth's chest tightened with a pang of pity for the injured woman. But her own anger burned too. "I don't know what James promised you, Miss Delgado, but he's my husband. I didn't know you existed. You were hidden from me just like I was hidden from you." Cassandra closed her eyes, tears streaming down. "I believed him. He told me he would leave you, that I was the one he truly loved. An anguished sob broke from her. I gave up so much. I nearly died. Elizabeth stiffened at that revelation. Had James pledged to leave her? James frantically shook his head. Cassandra, I said things, but... Cassandra's fury exploded. Don't insult me. You said it again and again. You told me you were trapped in a loveless marriage, that you and Elizabeth only stayed together for the family's sake, that you wanted a divorce after the baby was born. You told me we'd be free to start a life together. Elizabeth felt as though the floor had opened beneath her. She shot James a look of raw betrayal. Is that true? He stammered. It was the heat of the moment. I wasn't thinking straight. I only said it to keep Cassandra from leaving me. Elizabeth's lips quivered in anger and sorrow. So, you promised her a future, all while I was pregnant with your child. And then, once she was out of commission, you never intended for her to be part of your life again. James pressed his hands to his temples. I didn't know what to do. Cassandra turned her face away, sobbing silently. Friedman hovered by the door, alarmed by the escalating tension. Elizabeth inhaled shakily, feeling protective of Cassandra despite her role as James's mistress. The heartbreak in the room felt suffocating. That's enough for today, Elizabeth declared, stepping toward Friedman. She needs rest. I'll ensure the bills remain paid, but from now on, I'll handle it personally. James, let's go. In that moment, Elizabeth assumed a mantle of power neither James nor Cassandra expected. She signaled that she, not James, would control the narrative. She didn't know exactly how things would unfold, but she knew that if she didn't assert her agency, now the chaos would consume her. Back home, Elizabeth stormed out of the car the moment they arrived at the estate. James followed, begging her to give him a chance to explain. Cassandra exaggerated, he argued. I never fully intended to divorce you. I was just caught up. It was an affair, not a new life plan. Elizabeth stared at him, tears burning in her eyes. I can't even look at you. I don't know which is worse, that you betrayed me, or that you used such blatant, manipulative lies on her. Both, I suppose. James pleaded. Elizabeth, the first beg you, don't give up on me. I'll do anything. She exhaled a shaking breath. Then be prepared for consequences. I'm not sure if we can salvage our marriage, but if we do, I'm setting the terms. She retreated to her separate bedroom, leaving James alone with his dread. Days melted into a strange routine. James tried repeatedly to apologize, but Elizabeth refused to speak about the affair. She spent her time finalizing her last trimester medical appointments and consulting with lawyers about her potential options. Meanwhile, she arranged for Cassandra's ongoing treatment, transferring the monthly payments from James's secret account to a new account she created in both her and James's names. If nothing else, it forced James to come to her for every transaction, ensuring she had control. Cassandra's condition improved. Friedman reported that her memory was returning in patchy fragments. The moment she felt strong enough to talk to reporters or lawyers, the scandal could explode. Gossip columns hungrily eyed James Harrington's personal life, suspecting rumors but lacking proof. Elizabeth dreaded a media frenzy, but steeled herself for the possibility. If that happened, she would protect herself and her child. James would have to face the consequences of his deceit. One afternoon, a few weeks after Cassandra regained consciousness, Elizabeth received an urgent call from Friedman. Mrs. Harrington, Miss Delgado is asking to see you. She says it's important. Elizabeth hesitated, but curiosity and compassion won out. She agreed and soon found herself again by Cassandra's bedside. This time, Cassandra was sitting up, propped against pillows, face pale but alert. She looked at Elizabeth with a quiet intensity. "Thank you for coming," Cassandra began softly. I wanted to apologize. I had no idea James was lying to us both so thoroughly." Elizabeth offered a wry, sad smile. I suspect he told each of us different stories. We both believed him. Cassandra swallowed hard. He told me you were controlling cold and that you were only staying with him out of obligation. He said your marriage was over long before we met. But seeing you, hearing everything, I realize he manipulated me. I wanted to hate you for being his wife, but now I see you're also a victim. Elizabeth felt tears welling in her eyes. I wish things had never come to this, but thank you for your honesty. Cassandra's lips trembled. He risked my life. He left me in this clinic as though I were some inconvenience. I feel like he tried to erase me once I was no longer useful or fun. Elizabeth nodded, acknowledging the heartbreak. I don't have an easy answer for you, but I promise you'll receive all the medical care you need. I won't let him abandon you. Cassandra's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you. One more thing, I spoke with the doctors. They said the accident might have been less severe if I hadn't rushed that night. James had demanded I meet him in Geneva. In a way, he's directly responsible for why I took those roads so late. Elizabeth pressed her lips together. She felt a pang of sympathy for Cassandra, but also recognized the conversation was edging into legal territory. I understand, she said quietly. Do what you must to heal and move forward. Cassandra looked down, tears dripping onto the white hospital sheets. I plan to. I'm meeting with a lawyer to discuss my options. But please know, I won't do anything to intentionally hurt you or your child. Whatever I do, it's aimed at holding James accountable for what he did to me. Elizabeth's gaze grew distant, imagining the storm that was about to break over James's head. She simply nodded. I see. Thank you for telling me. Once again at Rosemore Manor, Elizabeth confronted James that evening. Cassandra is awake, stronger, and speaking to lawyers. She may sue you. I don't know if she can, but she might try. James went pale. Sue me for what? The accident was not my fault. Elizabeth gave him a bitter look. She believes you pressured her to travel under unsafe conditions. She also claims you effectively tried to imprison her in that clinic. It's complicated, but with enough evidence, this could become a high-profile case. He shook his head frantically. This can't happen. My reputation, my deals. I could lose everything. Elizabeth's voice was cold. Perhaps you should have thought about that before starting an affair and lying to everyone. She paused, then spoke the words that had been forming for weeks. I've consulted lawyers myself. If I want to, I can file for divorce and likely get custody of our child, considering your moral misconduct and attempts at deception. James's eyes widened in horror. Elizabeth, please. What about us, our baby? She swallowed, feeling a deep pain. Despite everything, part of me still wants our child to have a father. But I refuse to stay in a marriage built on lies. So here's my condition: full honesty financially, emotionally. You will put the estate, the business shares, all your assets into transparent accounts. I want them accessible in case you ever dare lie again. We will sign a post-nuptial agreement stating that if you commit another breach of trust, I have rights to the estate. And you will pay for Cassandra's full recovery with no strings attached. James looked both humbled and frightened. That's a lot to ask. Elizabeth's laugh was harsh. You took a lot from me. You took my faith, my sense of security. If you want to be in this marriage and be a father to our baby, you'll do it. He nodded, resigned. Yes, I'll do it. Just don't leave me. As Elizabeth turned to go, tears brimmed again. She realized her pregnancy hormones were making her even more emotional, but this was real heartbreak. She didn't know if she could ever truly forgive him, but for her child's sake, she was willing to try. In the weeks that followed, James complied with Elizabeth's demands. He met with lawyers, hammered out a post-nuptial agreement, and transferred partial ownership of his properties and accounts to Elizabeth. Business partners grumbled. Rumors swirled about the reason behind these abrupt changes. James put out statements claiming he was reorganizing his wealth for estate planning reasons. Meanwhile, Cassandra filed a personal injury lawsuit against James, accusing him of negligence and emotional distress. The tabloids caught wind of it, and soon James's carefully manicured public image began to crumble. Photos surfaced of James with Cassandra in Rome, fueling speculation. The press had a field day, painting him as a philandering millionaire who had driven his mistress into harm's way. Investors raised eyebrows. Stocks for Harrington Capital wavered. Elizabeth found herself in the crosshairs of gossip columns. They labeled her the long-suffering wife, humiliating her further. She shielded herself at Rosemore Manor, focusing on her final weeks of pregnancy. She avoided social media, ignoring the swirling rumors. Her only solace was that the baby was healthy, the doctor said. She often rested in the nursery, rocking in the chair, imagining a simpler future where the child could grow up in a stable household. James, for his part, seemed broken. He spent hours meeting with crisis PR teams, lawyers, and advisors, trying to salvage his reputation. At night, he returned home exhausted, exchanging only a few words with Elizabeth. The mansion felt like a silent battleground, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Despite the legal battles, Elizabeth made sure Cassandra's medical expenses were covered. Now in a rehabilitation center, Cassandra was learning to walk steadily again, regaining her life step by step. Elizabeth called occasionally to check on her progress. They were not friends, nor would they ever be, but there was a sense of mutual respect born from shared betrayal. Each was seeking to reclaim her life after James's duplicity. As winter approached, Elizabeth went into labor. A ferocious storm raged outside, rain lashing the windows of Rosemore Manor. James, frazzled and anxious, rushed Elizabeth to the hospital. Gone were the illusions of perfection. They arrived in the middle of the night, Elizabeth's contractions coming fast and furious. In the maternity ward, hours felt like days. Elizabeth grasped James's hand, tears of pain and fear mingling with residual anger. But in that crucible of raw emotion, amid the sting of contractions and the swirling hospital lights, something fragile but earnest emerged. A flicker of understanding that they were on the brink of a life-altering moment, a new life that transcended the tangled web of lies. Finally, at dawn, their baby was born, a beautiful girl with a strong, healthy cry. Exhausted, Elizabeth gazed upon their daughter, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. James was speechless, overcome by a wave of relief and awe. For a moment, the trials of the past months melted away. The baby was perfect. A new start, an innocent life untainted by scandal or heartbreak. Holding the baby in her arms, Elizabeth felt a sense of purpose that transcended everything else. She wasn't sure if her marriage would survive, but she knew her love for this tiny person would guide her choices going forward. James kneeled beside the hospital bed, tears on his cheeks, whispering apologies and promises. Elizabeth closed her eyes, listening but not yet ready to respond. The baby's small hand curled around her finger. In that moment, Elizabeth decided that above all else, she would protect her child's future, even if it meant leaving James eventually. But she would give him a chance to prove he could be the father their daughter deserved. Weeks later, Elizabeth left the hospital with her newborn, who they named Clara Rose Harrington, a nod to the estate's beloved rose gardens. They returned to Rosemore Manor, where a new nursery awaited. Elizabeth took joy in small moments. Clara's gentle coos, the late-night feedings, the sense of wonder that accompanied new motherhood. James tried his best to atone. He was present for every feeding, changed diapers, sang lullabies off-key, but with genuine devotion. The lawsuit with Cassandra was settled quietly out of court for a substantial sum. She used the money to build a new life far away from James's orbit, but occasionally sent Elizabeth updates on her continued recovery, never to gloat, but as a courtesy. Elizabeth appreciated the gesture, though it came tinged with sorrow. As time passed, the scandal receded from tabloid headlines. Another celebrity controversy overshadowed James's story, allowing him to gradually restore his reputation. The reorganization of his wealth, insisted upon by Elizabeth, remained in place. The memory of betrayal lingered, but in the hush of late-night feedings, Elizabeth saw glimpses of a changed man in James. Whether it was remorse, fatherly love, or both, he seemed determined to be a better person for Clara, if not for himself. Did Elizabeth fully forgive him? Such wounds are slow to heal, if they ever do completely, but for now, a fragile peace settled over Rosemore Manor. On sunny mornings, they would walk together through the rose garden, Elizabeth cradling Clara, James pushing the stroller, trying to find a sense of normalcy after a storm of lies. If love remained, it was scarred but perhaps more honest than before. Sometimes, late at night, Elizabeth would lie awake, listening to Clara's soft breathing, recalling every twist and betrayal. She knew the future held no guarantees, but she resolved to raise her daughter to value truth, resilience, and self-respect. Whatever happened with James, Elizabeth vowed that Clara would never be deceived or neglected. She carried the lessons of this tumultuous chapter like armor, determined never to be blindsided again. And so, the tale of the millionaire who thought his mistress was safely in a coma, only for his pregnant wife to discover the hidden truth, ends in a tenuous equilibrium. Lives were shattered, then slowly pieced back together. Sins were exposed, consequences paid.
A swirl of frost-laced wind hits Daniel's face the moment he steps out of his car, black coattails flapping against the flurry of snow. The Winter Ball has been the most anticipated event of the year, a glittering palace of music, rich wines, and elite company. But for Daniel, it's another stark reminder that he's walking in alone. He steels himself, determined not to let memories of the past taint his evening. Then across the ballroom's grand foyer, he catches sight of her Eleanor, his ex-wife. She isn't alone. She's holding the hands of 4 children who each carry the exact color and shape of his own eyes. The Winter Ball took place in the heart of Manhattan at the luxurious Plaza Hotel near Central Park. Crisp December air clung to Daniel White's every breath as he made his way past doormen who greeted him with polite nods. The swirling lights of the city reflected on the fresh snowfall, granting an almost fairy tale aura to the evening. Inside, the hotel's lobby dazzled with poinsettias, golden wreaths, and artful Christmas trees. The florid notes of a string quartet wafted through the corridor, luring him toward the grand ballroom. Daniel, 37 years old, had always been considered dashing. Tall, with a chiseled jaw and haunted green eyes, he moved with a confident grace that came less from ego and more from an innate sense of self. Yet tonight, an uninvited pang of loneliness gripped his heart. Attending the ball alone was never his plan. Just a year ago, he had imagined standing here with his wife Elena on his arm, both of them in elegantly tailored outfits, exchanging polite smiles with Manhattan's elite, forging connections for their philanthropic endeavors. But life had taken a brutal turn. He and Elena parted ways under painful circumstances that still felt raw. Despite the veneer of normalcy, he attempted to wear Tom Ford suit perfectly, knotted tie, polished demeanor. Daniel felt like an open wound in the midst of a glittering crowd. Every decoration, every swirl of laughter, every passing perfume reminded him of the life he had lost. He tried to distract himself by thinking of small talk about his work at Harrington and White Investments about the latest Wall Street Journal headlines about the real estate deals the firm had lined up. He thought of the people he might meet tonight. Potential clients, old friends, distant acquaintances like Teresa Wilson from his days at Yale, and donors who might support his cherished cause, the foundation he'd created in honor of his late father to fund scholarships for underprivileged kids. The grand double doors to the ballroom stood open, revealing a dazzling space, sparkling chandeliers, marble floors, and swirling couples in formal attire. As Daniel stepped across the threshold, he felt both an unsettling excitement and a sense of dread. Somewhere in this crowd, there could be a face from the past. Elena's face, perhaps, but in the swirl of suits and gowns, he couldn't immediately see her. He exhaled slowly, reminding himself that this evening was meant to be a fresh start, or at least a test of his ability to move on. After all, Elena had carved her own path, seemingly uninterested in the shared dreams they'd once built. He clenched his fists in his pockets. This night is for me, he thought. I'm going to enjoy myself, come what may. Daniel's mind drifted back to the day he first met Eleanor. It was during a summer internship at a hedge fund in Boston, back when they were both wide-eyed graduate students. She was bold, brilliant, and carried an aura of mystery that captivated him. Elena's luscious dark hair framed her olive complexion, and her deep brown eyes flashed with ambition. She had come from a modest background in Montreux, Switzerland, and her accent, along with her fierce determination, made her stand out among the crowd of interns. Their attraction was instant, fueled by late-night strategy sessions and stolen glances at coffee breaks. By the end of the internship, they'd begun a relationship that seemed as bright and promising as their future careers. Within 2 years after they'd finished graduate school, he at Yale, she at Columbia, they married in a private ceremony officiated at a small chapel in upstate New York. His mother, Carol White, and her father, André de la Montagne, blessed the union with tears of joy. Yet as they built their careers, cracks began to form. Both were ambitious. Both wanted the best for themselves, and ironically, that drive which once unified them started to push them apart. Eleanor felt stifled by the conventional life Daniel seemed to desire, a suburban home, dinner parties, early nights. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled to keep up with Eleanor's relentless push for success and adventure. She took job opportunities in Hong Kong and Zurich, while Daniel remained in New York to care for his ailing father and to stabilize his fledgling investment firm, Harrington and White, which he co-founded with his best friend from college, James Harrington. Long, silent months apart replaced the passion they once shared. Emails and texts became the main medium of communication. The final blow came when his father passed away, and Elena didn't show up to the funeral. She was stuck in a negotiation in Shanghai, or so she claimed. Daniel never forgave her for that. The day after the funeral, he filed for divorce. The year since the divorce was granted felt like a haze of regrets and half-hearted attempts to move forward. Daniel's mother tried to console him. James Harrington tried to bury him in work, hoping he'd forget his heartbreak in corporate success. But the hurt ran deep. He wasn't just losing Elena. He was losing the idea of the family he had so desperately wanted to build, the stability he had vowed to create, a vow that was broken. Little did he know that this fateful night at the winter ball would unravel secrets that would cut deeper than he ever imagined. A month ago, Daniel had almost declined the invitation to the winter ball. The event, hosted annually by New York's philanthropic circle, was a magnet for the richest and most influential personalities. It was a chance to mingle, to raise money for various causes, and to flash power and status. Harrington and White had been a chief sponsor for the past 3 years. Daniel James Harrington had told him we can't skip it. Our firm's entire public relations campaign is anchored on us being present front and center. This is how we attract high-profile clients. Daniel, sitting behind his mahogany desk, stared at the invitation's gold-trimmed edges. The bold lettering read, "Winter Ball, an evening of giving and glamour." He sighed. "I just don't feel up to it, James." His partner, a tall man with sandy hair and an unrelenting optimism, placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Look, I know you've been through a rough patch, but it's time to step out there again. If you don't, you'll never move on." Daniel had half a mind to crumple the invitation. Memories of attending this event with Eleanor the previous year, dressed in matching midnight blue ensembles, dancing under the chandelier, celebrating the expansion of their philanthropic network, still haunted him. Back then, the final stage of divorce was looming, even if they pretended all was well in front of the cameras. But James had a point. Daniel's philanthropic foundation needed exposure, and the firm needed him to show that he was still the confident leader they all relied on. Perhaps the winter ball could mark a turning point, a chance to re-enter society with his head held high. After all, what were the odds? Elena would be there. She'd been traveling the world, seemingly unconcerned with the philanthropic circuit in New York. Reluctantly, he wrote out his acceptance, sealed the envelope, and sent it back. The next day, he forwarded his measurements to his tailor for a new suit, an outward sign that he intended to move forward, even if his heart still lagged behind. The clink of champagne glasses and the resonant echoes of string instruments filled the grand ballroom. Women in sweeping satin gowns floated on the arms of men in crisp tuxedos. A faint scent of pine from the holiday decorations mixed with the sweet aroma of desserts placed at the buffet table. Daniel tried to relax by the refreshment station, swirling a glass of sparkling water. He was never one for too much alcohol, especially not when he needed to keep his wits about him. Around him, clusters of socialites murmured gossip and speculation. Teresa Wilson, a college acquaintance now working for the New York Times, offered him a polite nod from across the room. He returned the gesture, but avoided prolonged eye contact, not in the mood for an in-depth conversation. His eyes scanned the dancing couples, the swirl of color and elegance. Usually he'd find it all mesmerizing. The soft glow of chandeliers overhead, the confident laugh of donors proud to share their wealth, the swirl of philanthropic ambition that actually did some good in the world. But tonight, an uneasy tension weighed on him. Something about the air felt thick, as though the energy in the room was brimming with revelations waiting to be spilled. He stepped away from the crowd, weaving through elegantly dressed men and women. A group of corporate bankers from Goldman Sachs tried to engage him in talk about the stock market's recent fluctuations. Another small cluster from a tech startup pitched their new app. He feigned interest, made a few polite remarks, but found himself inching toward the corner of the room where a sense of quiet serenity reigned, just as he took a seat at a small table beside a pillar draped in silver garlands. His gaze drifted over the dance floor and froze. The murmuring crowd seemed to blur. The music dulled, as if his senses had zeroed in on a single figure. There, standing at the top of the ballroom's ornate staircase, was Elena. She wore a wine-red gown that accentuated her lithe form, her dark hair cascading in loose waves over her shoulders. A hush seemed to envelop him, like a wind had swept through his chest. After all these months, it still felt unreal to see her in person. It wasn't just Elena's presence that paralyzed him. At her sides stood 4 small figures. Children. 2 girls and 2 boys, each no older than 5 or 6. And in the gleam of the chandelier's light, Daniel noticed the most striking detail. Each child's eyes were the same luminous green as his own. His mind reeled. This had to be some sort of trick of the light. It couldn't be. But as Elena stepped forward, guiding them gently down the staircase, the resemblance became even clearer. 4 children with the same color and shape of eyes as Daniel White. A jolt of disbelief electrified his veins. He'd never heard Elena mention children after they split. He hadn't heard a whisper from mutual acquaintances. And now, out of nowhere, these 4 kids appeared, each bearing his most distinctive feature. The glass in his hand trembled. The lively chatter of the ball receded to a low hum. All he could do was watch, transfixed, as Elena and those children moved further into the throng of people, heading unerringly in his direction. Daniel rose slowly, heart pounding. If Elena saw him, she gave no outward sign. She turned to exchange pleasantries with a member of the philanthropic committee, her polite smile carefully in place. The children clung to her hands, one of the little girls glancing shyly around the room. Up close, the resemblance was even more impossible to deny. Each child had inherited the green eyes that were so distinctive in Daniel's family. Each had some subtle aspect of his facial structure, a dimple on the cheek, the angular tilt of the jaw, the gentle curve of the nose. He approached his steps, halting uncertain how to break the barrier of polite society that kept them separated. A swirl of dancers momentarily blocked his path. By the time he emerged into an opening, Eleanor was there, mere feet away, her expression unreadable. "Hello, Daniel," she said quietly. Even amidst the swirl of music and conversation, her voice carried to him, as though they were the only 2 people in the room. Her accent seemed a touch more pronounced than usual, or perhaps he was just hyper-aware of every detail in this moment. He swallowed, noticing the children shift uncomfortably behind her. "Elena," he managed, forcing out the word. Another breath. "I didn't know you'd be here." Her eyes flickered. The invitation came through an old contact. And, well, I wanted to support the cause. Also, I thought it might be time. "Time," he repeated. He let the word linger, casting a glance at the children, who were now standing awkwardly, clearly unsure of what was happening between the grown-ups. Time for what? She hesitated, and her gaze fell to the floor. Then, drawing in a soft breath, she said, "Time for you to meet someone." Turning, she placed a gentle hand on each child's shoulder. "Mon chéri," she whispered to the boy on her right. "This is Daniel. He's an old friend of mine." Daniel's heart twisted. Just an old friend. The boy looked up, wide-eyed, and offered a polite greeting. The rest followed suit, each voice small but distinct. 2 girls, 2 boys, all in a line. His mind whirled. He couldn't form the words to ask the burning question, the question that screamed for an answer. Instead, he forced a cordial smile. "How do you do?" "We're fine," replied the eldest boy, whose hair was chestnut, just like Daniel's was as a child. "My name's Sebastian." The others introduced themselves, Madeline, Florence, and Thomas. The mention of their names hammered in the reality of their existence. Daniel extended his hand tentatively, and each child shook it with a curious, polite manner that seemed unusual for their ages. At last he turned to Elena with an expression that must have pleaded for some kind of explanation. She read it clearly. "Daniel," she said in a low tone, "I didn't plan on bringing them here to shock you. But I thought maybe this was the right time to tell you the truth." A tumult of anger, confusion, and heartbreak welled up in him. He glanced around, mindful of the many guests who might be watching. "Perhaps we should talk somewhere private." She nodded. "Yes, let's go to the side lounge. The children can stay with my nanny for a moment." She turned and beckoned a woman standing discreetly by the door, who hurried over and led the children away. A dull roar filled Daniel's ears as he and Elena glided along the perimeter of the ballroom. Guests parted to let them pass, and in their curious eyes, Daniel caught glimmers of speculation. Once they reached the smaller adjacent lounge, an ornate room with plush armchairs and soft lighting, they stepped inside and shut the door. The silence in the lounge was suffocating. Elena stood by a fireplace, golden light flickering against her dress. Daniel remained near the door, as though unsure whether to enter fully or bolt. Finally, she motioned him closer. His voice, when it emerged, trembled with barely contained emotion. Are they mine?" Elena studied him, eyes glistening. "Yes," she said, softly. "They are your children." The words struck Daniel like a physical blow. He staggered backward, pressing a hand against the door for support. For a moment it felt as though the world had inverted. The walls closed in his breath, caught in his chest. He tried to reconcile the reality of what he'd just heard with the life he'd been living alone, believing fatherhood was a dream that died when his marriage ended. How? Why? He struggled for coherent words. A dozen questions fought for priority in his mind. Why wouldn't you tell me? Why 4 children? Elena. Tears welled in her eyes, and she clasped her hands together, the diamond bracelet on her wrist glinting in the firelight. It's complicated, Daniel. I was pregnant when the divorce became final. I discovered I was carrying twins at first. But there was more to it. It was a complicated pregnancy that I had to keep under the care of a specialized clinic in Geneva. She paused, swallowing hard. I couldn't bring myself to tell you. We were both so angry, so hurt. And after the funeral of your father, I felt like there was no place for me in your life. No place for my burdens. Burdens, he snapped, voice rising. They're children, Eleanor. Our children. You denied me the chance to be a father. She flinched. I know. I was selfish. I was scared. My father convinced me it might be better this way. He wanted me back in Switzerland, away from the complexities of our relationship. A pounding ache built behind Daniel's eyes, half fury, half heartbreak. He remembered Elena's father, André de la Montagne, proud, aristocratic, always disapproving of Daniel's American roots, but 4 of them. Elena, how old are they? She let out a trembling sigh. Sebastian and Madeline are 6. Florence and Thomas are 5. Yes, I was already pregnant once before the divorce process, and it was a complicated timeline. I found out I was expecting Florence and Thomas much later. The pregnancies were nearly back-to-back. I kept it hidden under the chaos of traveling, and I found ways to manage without letting you know. Daniel closed his eyes. Waves of disbelief washing over him. For all this time, you never once sent me a clue. Never told me you'd had them. Tears slipped down Eleanor's cheeks. I wanted to multiple times, but each time I gathered the courage, something stopped me. Your mother's health issues, the business expansions, and your anger. We left things so bitterly. I thought I could protect the children by keeping them away from a toxic environment. She shook her head. I see now. That was a mistake. Mistake. He barked a humorless laugh. It's so much more than that. Elena, You've robbed me of 6 years of fatherhood. I could have known them, raised them." She lowered her head. "I'll never be able to make that up to you or to them, but I can try to fix it now if you'll let me." Daniel sank into an armchair, his limbs numb. This revelation turned his world inside out. For so long he'd thought fatherhood was an unreachable horizon, especially after the divorce. Now he had children, 4 living, breathing children who bore his eyes, his features, his lineage. He wanted to hate Eleanor, to rage at her for this injustice. But a quiet voice in his heart reminded him of how he'd once loved her, how complicated their parting had been. "You should have told me," he whispered, pressing his palms to his eyes. "I would have been there, no matter what was going on between us. That's a choice you made for both of us, and it wasn't yours to make alone." Elena knelt before him, voice quivering. "I know. I'm sorry, Daniel. Please let's talk about how to move forward for the children's sake, if nothing else." He looked at her, seeing the raw fear and regret. In the space of a single evening, everything had changed, and he had no idea how to proceed in a way that would heal 6 years of damage. Overcome by the shock of Eleanor's confession, Daniel found his mind spiraling back in time. He remembered the bitter arguments that had led to their divorce, how his father's terminal illness put pressure on him to stay in New York, how Eliana, with her unstoppable career drive, had accepted an offer in Shanghai, simultaneously bristling at Daniel's pleas for her to return. He recalled the day he discovered the plane tickets she'd booked not just for business, but for a possible permanent move overseas. The day he confronted her, they both said things they could never take back. "You'll never be satisfied with who I am," he'd accused. "You don't want a partner, you want a trophy wife." She retorted, eyes blazing. They parted ways, each convinced the other was irredeemable, and in the swirl of attorneys and court proceedings, each attempted to carve out a future free from the other's disappointment. When the divorce finalized, Daniel had felt strangely numb, as if a piece of him had died. He sought solace in building Harrington and White into a powerhouse, throwing himself into philanthropic work, perhaps to fill the void left by the breakdown of his personal life. Now discovering Elena had been pregnant at the time, or just shortly thereafter, turned all his assumptions into lies. He remembered every phone call they missed, every email they'd let go unanswered. They had been so consumed by pride that neither had paused to consider the bigger picture, that there might be unborn children deserving of unity and love. In the quiet lounge, Elena was still kneeling by his chair, eyes rimmed with tears. The faint sound of the Winter Balls Orchestra drifted in from beyond the door, an incongruous soundtrack to their shattering revelation. He said softly, "I need to know everything, Elena. No more secrets?" She nodded, standing and moving to the window where she looked out over the city lights. "I found out I was pregnant with Sebastian and Madeline about 4 months before we filed for divorce. But we were in the midst of the biggest fight of our lives. I was traveling for work. I felt alone, and my father persuaded me to stay quiet until I could come home to Switzerland. He never liked you, Daniel, and he wanted me to raise the children by myself." She turned to him, voice trembling. But then I realized I was expecting again Florence and Thomas shortly after the birth of the twins. The pregnancies were a medical miracle and complication. The doctors told me the second was an unusual overlapping pregnancy, extremely rare. I was terrified. I didn't know if I'd survive. There were complications. I was hospitalized for months in Geneva. During that time, my father kept everything hidden from the outside world. I was too weak to fight him. Daniel listened, each word burning into his soul. He envisioned Elena alone in a Swiss clinic battling a perilous pregnancy, while he, thousands of miles away, cursed her name for not being present in his life. A complicated swirl of sorrow, pity, and anger gripped him. And after the births, you just never thought it important enough to pick up the phone. Her eyes flashed with regret. I was scared. I was told you'd moved on, that you resented me. And in truth, I was ashamed for deceiving you. Yes, I let pride and fear dictate my actions. I thought maybe if I raised them alone, I could avoid all that heartbreak, all that anger. But it's been a burden on my conscience, especially as the children have grown and started asking questions about their father. Daniel closed his eyes, taking a moment to let her words settle. He pictured 4 children in a Swiss estate, asking, "Where's Daddy?" and receiving no real answers. The heartbreak coiled tighter in his chest. With trembling conviction, he rose to his feet. I have to meet them properly. They need to know who I am. Elena moved to open the door. Of course. They're just next door with the nanny. Let's go. Stepping into the side corridor, Daniel felt the warm overhead lights shining down on him with an almost glaring intensity. The sweet, festive music in the background felt surreal. He was about to meet his children for the first time in the midst of a glittering winter ball. In a small antechamber, the 4 children sat in a circle with their nanny, a petite woman named Dominique, who was reading them a story to keep them occupied. As soon as Elena and Daniel entered, the children looked up, their wide green eyes fixed on Daniel. Madeline, the older girl, peered at him with curiosity. "You look like me," she said quietly, as if discovering something extraordinary. Daniel knelt, feeling tears prick at his eyes. "I guess we do look alike," he replied. Sebastian, the older boy, placed his hands on his hips with a surprising note of confidence. "Maman says you're very important in New York. Are you a prince or something?" Daniel couldn't help a small smile. "No, I'm not a prince. I just help run a company. And I do some work helping others." Florence, a shy girl, nestled closer to her nanny. "Are you a good man?" she asked, her voice small. The question speared Daniel's heart. He glanced at Elena, who was silently watching, tears shimmering on her lashes. Carefully he answered, "I try to be. I'm not always perfect, but I do my best." Thomas, the youngest, touched Daniel's tie. "I like your tie," he said, smiling. Elena knelt beside Daniel, resting a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Kids, I want you to know that Daniel is someone very important to me, and to you." She paused, her gaze flickering to Daniel. "He's your father." The words settled over the room. There was no thunderous reaction, no immediate meltdown, but rather a kind of hushed awe. Madeline was the first to speak again. "That means you love us." Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat. "More than I can say. Even though we're just meeting, I already feel that you're the most precious gift I could have." Sebastian studied Daniel with a pensive look. "Then why didn't you come see us before?" A flash of guilt twisted inside Daniel, though the fault wasn't truly his. But how could he explain that? He glanced at Elena, who placed a gentle hand on Sebastian's shoulder. "That's my fault," she said. "I didn't tell him where we were. Sometimes adults make mistakes." Her admission left the children quiet. They seemed to accept it with a resilience that only children possess. Slowly, Thomas reached up and touched Daniel's hair, as if to confirm he was real. Daniel felt his heart break and mend all at once. He opened his arms hesitantly, offering an embrace. One by one, the children stepped forward. Madeline first, then Sebastian, then the others. Their small arms wrapped around him, and for a moment he closed his eyes, letting the warmth of their presence wash over him. He didn't notice the tall figure standing in the corridor until someone cleared his throat. Daniel looked up to see James Harrington, his business partner and longtime friend, wearing an expression of utter shock. Daniel James said, struggling for composure, I've been looking for you, but I see you're preoccupied." His eyes roved over the 4 children. "Are these?" Daniel nodded, still holding on to the children. "Yes." "Mine." James stood there, mouth slightly open. But he rallied quickly, offering a small congratulatory nod. "I see. Well, I'll leave you to your reunion." He turned to go, then paused, giving Daniel a pointed look that seemed to say, "We need to talk." Daniel knew with a sinking feeling that his entire life, personal and professional, had just undergone a seismic shift. Everything from finances to living arrangements to his carefully curated public image would change once it became public knowledge that he had 4 children he'd never mentioned. And in his mind, he couldn't help wondering if more secrets were lurking behind Elena's sudden reappearance. Later that evening, after ensuring the children were settled in a quiet corner, with Dominique, Danielle, and Elena slipped away to find more privacy, they went up a short flight of stairs, ending up on a balcony overlooking the ballroom floor. Below them, the party continued in full swing, glittering gowns, twinkling lights, the hum of polite conversation. He stared down at the swirling crowd, then turned to Elena. "This is a lot to take in, Elena. Are you certain no uncertainties about their paternity?" She flinched at the question. "They're yours, Daniel. I swear it on everything I hold dear." His face softened. "I want to believe you. But you have to understand my perspective. You hid them from me for 6 years. Her cheeks turned pink. "I understand. If you want a paternity test, I won't stop you. Anything to give you peace of mind." He nodded, feeling a pang of guilt for doubting her. "I'm sorry. It's just, this is so unexpected." She waved off the apology with a trembling hand. "I deserve your suspicion, but I have no reason to lie now. My father, he urged me to cut you out of our lives entirely. He was never going to let you know about them. But they kept asking. They wanted to know why they didn't have a daddy like other children. And as they grew older, their resemblance to you grew more obvious." A wave of anger coursed through Daniel. "Your father, he's the one who convinced you to hide them from me." She shook her head. "I let him. I was emotionally weak, recovering from the pregnancies far from home. I can't blame him entirely." The mention of André de la Montagne sparked an old resentment in Daniel. Elena's father had never hidden his contempt for Daniel's lack of noble pedigree and the American approach to business. But to manipulate a situation this profoundly was beyond cruel. "You realize this is going to change everything," Daniel said. "I need to speak to a lawyer, figure out custody financial arrangements. And the children, how do we help them adjust?" Elena's face showed weariness, but also relief that Daniel was taking responsibility instead of pushing them away. "I've already spoken to a lawyer about my return to the States. I'm prepared to stay in New York if that's what it takes." He eyed her wary. "And your job?" She sighed. "I stepped back from my international projects. Right now, I'm focusing on philanthropic work. My father doesn't approve, but that doesn't matter anymore. My priority is the children." Daniel let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He recalled how they once dreamed of having children, raising them in a home full of love and mutual respect. That dream had crumbled. Now faced with reality, they had to figure out how to pick up the pieces and build something stable for 4 innocent lives. "How do we start?" he asked softly. Elena's lips curved into a sad smile. "Perhaps by letting them know we both love them, that we are both here for them. Everything else can come later. For tonight, let's just be there for them." As the evening wore on, Daniel felt guilt creeping in. The 4 children, his children, were clearly bewildered by this sudden introduction. While they bravely tried to interact with Daniel, he sensed their uncertainty. After all, in their young minds, he was a stranger who happened to share their eyes, face shape, and last name. He tried to be jovial with them, kneeling to their level, listening to their half-formed stories about Switzerland, about their school, about the snow-capped mountains they missed. But inside, he was consumed by a swirl of emotions. He'd missed their first steps, first words, birthdays, 6 years of precious moments. And then came another jolt. During a lull, Madeline quietly asked, "Is Hans coming too?" Daniel glanced at Elena. Confusion etched on his face. Elena's expression stiffened. "We'll talk about that later, sweetheart," she said hastily. Hands Daniel pressed. Elena hesitated, then cleared her throat. I've been seeing someone, a colleague from work. It's not serious, but the children know him. He was around as a friend." A sharp pang of jealousy, anger, and betrayal shot through Daniel. That was only natural. Eleanor was no longer his wife, and she had every right to date. But the thought that another man had been a figure in his children's lives, even if just tangentially, set his teeth on edge. He fought to keep his voice calm. "So he's been around the children," Elena nodded, looking away. "They like him, Daniel. He's been kind to them." Daniel swallowed the bitterness rising in his throat. "I see," Sebastian piped up. "Hans takes us sledding. He helped me make a birdhouse once." The image of another man, stepping into fatherly roles, stung Daniel deeply. Yet he forced a polite nod. "That's nice of him." Elena quickly changed the subject, offering the children a plate of mini pastries from a passing waiter. But Daniel's thoughts lingered on Hans. He wondered if Hans had become a paternal figure, if the children would look to him instead of Daniel. By the time the ball was winding down, Daniel had endured the well-meaning small talk of acquaintances who admired the adorable children, asking whose they were. He offered vague smiles and quick answers, uncertain how to handle such personal inquiries. Outside, the snowfall had intensified, blanketing the city in white. Daniel stood with the children under the glowing street lamps, waiting as a valet brought around 2 cars. He felt an unspoken tension with Elena by his side. They were 2 estranged individuals, forced back together by the existence of these 4 precious lives. "Where are you staying tonight?" he asked her. "At the Ritz, for now," she replied. "I didn't know how you'd react, so I didn't make longer-term arrangements." He nodded. "That's fine. Look, tomorrow I'd like to spend more time with them. Can we arrange that?" Elena studied him, relief softening her features. "Of course. They need to know their father." Daniel forced a tiny smile at the word father, still grappling with the weight of it. Then, as the children climbed into the waiting SUV, Daniel laid a gentle hand on Elena's arm. "Thank you for telling me, even if it's late." She gave him a somber nod. "And I'm sorry." In the hush of the swirling snow, Daniel watched as the vehicle pulled away. He stood there a long time, staring into the winter night, silently vowing that whatever happened next, he wouldn't abandon those children. No matter how painful the transition, they were his, and he was theirs. The following morning, Daniel woke in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park. Sleep had eluded him for much of the night visions of 4 bright-eyed faces populating his restless dreams. He rose early, brewing a pot of strong coffee as he mulled over the next step. He called his mother Carol White, who lived in a quiet suburb in Connecticut. It was time she heard the news. When he told her she had 4 grandchildren, the coffee mug almost slipped from his hand as he heard her reaction. First she stammered in disbelief, then sobbed, then erupted in joy mingled with confusion and a tinge of anger at Eleanor's secrecy. Despite everything, Carol couldn't wait to meet them. Daniel also placed a call to James Harrington, who demanded an explanation. They arranged to meet in the Harrington and White boardroom that afternoon, once Daniel had a chance to visit with his newly discovered family. A text beeped on Daniel's phone just as he stepped into the hallway. Elena, we're at the Central Park Zoo with the kids. Meet us here if you can. Daniel hurried to dress, donning a casual sweater and coat. The crisp winter air bit at his cheeks as he strode down the block, weaving past holiday shoppers and carriage horses. The sense of surreal anticipation made his heart pound. At the zoo's entrance, he found Elena and the children watching seals swim in a large tank. The children spotted him first, waving excitedly. His chest warmed at their enthusiasm. He approached with a smile. "Hey guys," Sebastian grabbed his hand. "Look at the seals, Papa." The casual use of Papa startled Daniel, but he squeezed the boy's hand in response, a lump forming in his throat. Elena noticed his reaction. "They adapt quickly," she murmured, eyes bright with unshed tears. They strolled along, admiring the polar bears and penguins, occasionally stopping to buy hot cocoa. Daniel tried to soak in every detail, how Madeline tugged on his sleeve to show him her favorite animals. How Thomas giggled when the penguins waddled, how Florence shyly stuck close to Elena, how Sebastian asked a million questions about everything. They were a family moving in a loose cluster, forging a tender sense of unity. Yet Daniel couldn't help noticing a shadow in Elena's gaze, as if she were keeping another secret. After a while, Sebastian raced ahead. "Papa, there's an ice sculpture over there." Elena and Daniel lagged behind, exchanging a look. "They're incredible," Daniel remarked. "Smart, curious. I'm amazed at how they each have their own personality." Elena smiled. "You would have made a wonderful father, Daniel." He regarded her intently. "Is there anything else you haven't told me? Because right now I need the truth. Everything." She sighed, glancing away. "There is something else, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up. It's about Thomas. He's had some health issues since he was born prematurely." Alarm raced through Daniel. "Health issues? Is he okay?" "He's mostly fine," Elena said quickly. "But he has a minor heart condition. The doctors say it's manageable with medication and monitoring. He might need surgery in the future, but there's a good chance he won't." Daniel's face paled. "My God, Elena, you should have told me. I'd have been there for him." She placed a hand on his arm. "I know. This is what I regret most. I'm ready to set things right now. I've brought them here so we can live in New York for a while, see specialists if needed, and ensure he gets the best care. I'll bear any cost if you want." Daniel's response was immediate. "No. We'll share it. He's my son, our son. I'll do whatever it takes to help him." Emotions swarmed in Eleanor's eyes, relief mingled with sorrow. "Thank you," Their conversation was cut short by the children's excited calls. They hurried over, trying to smile and laugh as if everything was normal. But for Daniel, each moment with the children was a reminder of what he'd missed and of the challenges to come. After the zoo, they decided to warm up at a nearby cafe, a cozy establishment known for its artisan pastries. The children devoured mini croissants while Elena sipped a cappuccino, and Daniel hovered protectively, noticing every detail about his new family members. Between bites of pastry, Florence hesitantly asked Papa, "Do you have a nice house?" Daniel chuckled softly. "I have an apartment. It's big enough for all of you if you ever want to visit." Madeline's face lit up. "Can we see it?" Eleanor shot Daniel a questioning glance. "Are you sure you're ready for that?" He took a moment before nodding. "Yes. I'd like them to see where I live. I have a spare room that can be turned into something for them." So it was decided. They gathered their things and took a quick taxi ride to Daniel's penthouse overlooking Central Park. The building's doorman, Mr. Bartholomew, nearly dropped his cap upon seeing Daniel leading 4 children by the hand. "Elena. Kids?" "This is home," Daniel said, opening his front door. The foyer was sleek and modern, perhaps too sterile for children's tastes. Sebastian's eyes widened at the floor-to-ceiling windows, while Madeline squealed with delight at the view of the snowy treetops and distant skyscrapers. They spread out, exploring. Elena followed them, pointing out paintings and artifacts Daniel had collected. Her gaze stopped on a photo of Daniel's parents. "Your mother will be ecstatic," she said. "She's already invited all of you to spend Christmas in Connecticut," Daniel replied. A flicker of fear touched Elena's face. "It might be overwhelming to meet your entire family so soon." He shrugged gently. "They're the children's family too, Elena. We can take it slow. I just want them to feel welcomed." She nodded, watching Thomas run giggling across the living room's polished floor. They deserve a big family Christmas. They've never really had that. A warm feeling grew in Daniel's chest. Maybe despite the heartbreak, they could form a family dynamic, if not as husband and wife, then at least as coring co-parents. Suddenly, Eleanor's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face paling. She excused herself, stepping into the hallway. Daniel lingered, an uneasy feeling creeping over him. A few minutes later, Elena returned, face ashen. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's Hans," she said, voice tight. "He's in New York. He wants to see me and the children." Daniel felt a sudden wave of protectiveness, almost territorial. "He has no claim on them. I'm their father." Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's not that simple. The kids know him. They care for him." "But I'm here now," Daniel insisted, trying to quell the anger. "I won't just stand by while some stranger plays father." She looked torn. "I understand. I'll talk to him. Just please don't make this more complicated than it has to be." Daniel exhaled, controlling his temper. "Fine. But I want to be present for any meeting. The children need stability, not confusion." Elena nodded, and the tension in her shoulders seemed to ease. But the mere prospect of Hans stepping into the picture threatened to upend the fragile dynamic Daniel and Elena were beginning to forge. Over the next few days, Daniel spent every spare moment with his children. He took them to the Museum of Natural History, where they marveled at dinosaur skeletons and celestial exhibits. He showed them Rockefeller Center's towering Christmas tree, letting them watch the ice skaters gliding beneath twinkling lights. Those days were some of the happiest Daniel had experienced in a long time, yet a lingering worry about Hans hovered in the back of his mind. Would Hans try to disrupt his reconnection with the children? One afternoon, while Elena and the children were napping in their suite at the Ritz, Daniel went to his office to meet James Harrington. Sitting in the sleek boardroom with glass walls overlooking Manhattan, Daniel braced for James's barrage of questions, so James began leaning forward. 4 kids. Daniel, you have no idea the shockwaves this is causing among our investors and clients. They're all calling me asking if there's some scandal or if we've been hiding something. Daniel pinched the bridge of his nose. I didn't know, James. Believe me, this was as much a surprise to me as it was to the world. James studied him intently. Do you believe Elena's story? Daniel nodded slowly. Yes. She's done a DNA test already. Or at least she's offered it. I believe her. They have my eyes, for God's sake. James exhaled. All right. So how are we handling this from a PR standpoint? Daniel thought for a moment. We release a brief statement saying I've recently become aware of my children that I intend to fulfill all my responsibilities as a father, and that the details remain private. That should suffice. I don't want to exploit my kids' private lives. James agreed. But be aware the media might spin it. Elena was high profile in the finance world too. They'll probably dig up old dirt. Daniel nodded, crossing his arms. Let them dig. I just care about the kids right now. They're my top priority. James softened, offering Daniel a supportive smile. You've always wanted a family, man. Maybe this is your chance. Just be careful with Elena. She's unpredictable. Daniel gave a mirthless chuckle. Trust me, I know. After the meeting, Daniel returned to the Ritz, a sense of determination fueling him. He wanted to talk to Elena about officially moving back to the US with the children. But when he arrived, he found her in tears in the lounge. She looked up, eyes puffy. Hans. He confronted me. He demanded to see the children. He's threatening legal action, claiming he's acted as a de facto parent. Daniel's blood ran cold. He has no legal claim. He's not their father. Elena sniffed, wiping her cheeks. He's not listed on any birth certificates, of course, but he's threatening to tell the tabloids about everything about how I hid the children from you, about the details of our finances. He wants money, Daniel. Daniel ground his teeth. So he's blackmailing you. She nodded miserably. I broke things off with him as soon as I decided to come to New York. He didn't take it well. Now he's furious. Rage coursed through Daniel, but he forced himself to remain calm. We'll handle it. I'll talk to my lawyers, and we'll put a stop to his threats. The children won't be used as pawns. Eleanor looked at him with gratitude. I'm sorry, Daniel. It seems every time you try to fix things, I bring another complication. He gently took her hand. We'll get through it. Together. For the kids. That evening, an unexpected phone call shattered the fragile calm. Hans called Daniel directly. His tone was aggressive, laced with bitterness. You think you can just waltz back into Elena's life and claim those children, Hans spat. I've been the one helping them for years. Daniel clenched his jaw. They're my children, Hans. My blood. Hans laughed harshly. Your blood, sure. But I was there when Eleanor needed help. If you had any decency, you'd let me at least see them. Daniel paused, wrestling with the primal urge to tell Hans to stay away forever. But he also recognized that the children knew Hans. Forcing them to lose him abruptly might be traumatic. We can discuss a supervised meeting, Daniel conceded. But if you try anything, any attempt at blackmail, I'll see you in court. Hans scoffed. You think your money and power can scare me? Elena's father tried that. He didn't succeed. Daniel ended the call, fury boiling in his veins. Elena, who stood nearby, watched him with anxious eyes. "We'll do a supervised meeting," he told her. "It might help the children's transition if they can say goodbye or set boundaries. But he's not going to threaten us anymore." She nodded, tears of relief shining. "Thank you for handling this." They set the meeting for the next day in the presence of lawyers at a neutral law office. The children arrived with Elena subdued and confused. Hans was already there, face pinched with anger. When the children ran to greet him, Daniel's stomach twisted. Hans cast a smug glance Daniel's way, as if to say, "See, they're mine in spirit." But Sebastian, after hugging Hans briefly, hurried to Daniel's side. "Papa, are you okay?" Daniel's heart soared at the simple question the child's concern for him. "I'm fine, buddy," he murmured, tousling Sebastian's hair. The negotiations that followed were tense. Hans wanted continued contact, threatening to leak scandalous information. Elena confessed that Hans had personal emails and financial records that could be damaging if taken out of context. Daniel's lawyer threatened Hans with a defamation suit if he went public. Finally, they reached a precarious agreement. Hans would receive a severance of sorts, a lump sum from Elena's personal funds, and would agree to no future contact with the children unless they requested it themselves once they were of age. It wasn't an ideal solution, but it would stave off immediate scandal and harassment. The children seemed unsettled as Hans gave them a final hug. Thomas clung to him for a moment, tears glistening in his eyes. Daniel's chest tightened at the sight, but he tried to remain stoic. Hans left abruptly, slamming the door behind him. Outside the office, Elena knelt to comfort the children, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel joined them, feeling the weight of these events pressing down on their small shoulders. In that moment, he promised himself he would never let them feel abandoned again. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Elena and the children moved into a rented townhouse near Daniel's apartment. Daniel spent his weekends showing them American traditions, like decorating a Christmas tree, baking cookies, and practicing English holiday carols. The day finally came for the children to meet Carol White, their grandmother in Connecticut. Despite the tension and swirling emotions, the meeting was a joyous occasion. Carol wept openly as she embraced each of her grandchildren, scolding Elena only briefly for keeping them hidden for so long. Christmas morning found them all gathered in Carol's cozy living room. Snow fell softly outside. The children squealed over presents, and Elena found herself welcomed warmly, surprisingly so, by Carol's motherly grace. Daniel, dressed in a comfy sweater, took time to reflect on how drastically his life had changed in mere weeks. He now had the family he had once dreamed about, though not in the way he'd imagined. Elena and Daniel still had much to resolve. Their romantic relationship remained uncertain. Old wounds and betrayals lingered, but so did a lingering thread of love. They'd begun counseling, determined to co-parent effectively. Whether or not they would reconcile as a couple remained to be seen. One late night after the children had gone to bed, Daniel and Elena sat on his penthouse balcony. The city lights twinkled below the hush of snow, making the moment feel magical. Elena leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder. "Do you think we could ever be a family again?" she asked. Daniel slipped an arm around her, 1,000 thoughts flooding his mind. "I think we already are a family," he said softly. "Maybe not the conventional kind, but we'll figure it out." Elena gazed at him, a small smile curving her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving us another chance." He closed his eyes, inhaling the crisp winter air. "Thank you for letting me be a father." They sat there for a long while, listening to the distant hum of the city, their hearts brimming with the complicated, fragile hope of a new beginning. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of heartbreak, hidden children, and the fragile hope of new beginnings. Daniel's story reminds us that even through betrayal and pain, love and forgiveness can lead to unexpected miracles.